Welcome to Soul Night Live, episode number 81. Tonight our guest is Bill Graham, and we will be discussing the evolution of Steely Dan music. Yeah, we're doing a little bit of a different show tonight. We're going to kind of take a look at a band's catalog and how their music is put together. So my good friend Bill Graham is a music educator and has the gear and the camera angles to show you exactly what's going on as he plays. So without further ado, I'm going to have Bill join us. In case you don't know Bill, you actually hear him every week on this show. If you watch one of the repeats I put on YouTube, we have a little theme song that plays right away at the beginning of every episode. That dun 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 dun, that little riff on the clavinet. That's Bill, and that's a real clavinet too. It's a Hohner, just like Stevie Wonder used. So anyhow, I'm gonna have Bill come on in, and we will take a deep dive look at Steely Dan music tonight. Good evening.
Hey, Sean, how's it going?
It's going well, Bill. Good to see you.
You too.
Thank you for taking the time to talk with us tonight about this wonderful music.
Absolutely. Happy to.
Yeah, I was curious, how did you first run across their music, and what is it that you love about it?
So the first record that I heard all the way through of theirs was definitely Asia. But before I even heard Asia, this is kind of funny. I saw their VH1 Storytellers. Do you remember that? It was around 2001.
Yeah,
so.
I remember. I got it on videotape around here someplace.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I would have been in 9th grade
Okay.
when I heard it, and it was just like I was, I was just starting to learn about jazz and learn about harmony. I had been a guitar player. Well, growing up, actually, I was a drummer first, and then I moved over to guitar, and then in early high school, I started playing piano, and like I said, learning about jazz and learning about harmony and theory and ear training and all that kind of stuff. And so when I heard Steely Dan, it was just like, yes, this is exactly what I want to hear out of pop music.
That's kind of how I felt about it too. I'm a little older than you, and I remember most of this stuff being on the radio. As a matter of fact, I remember riding in my brother's 68 Mustang and hearing Ricky when it was brand new. So it had to have been like 1973. And so it's funny how you can actually remember hearing a song for the first time. It's a short list, but there's a few where it just sticks in your head and you're like, I totally remember the first time I was aware of this group.
Absolutely.
I mean, I didn't know anything about them. I don't even think that I knew they were called Steely Dan. I just knew that Ricky better not lose that number.
Sure.
And I was probably thinking of some cartoon character named Ricky or something, or Lucy's husband, or I don't know. But, you always kind of.
Yeah, it's funny. By the time I encountered them, they were like not in the zeitgeist at all, and you didn't hear them on the radio. Or I don't know, maybe you heard them on the radio. I wasn't a radio consumer.
Yeah.
So maybe you still heard them a little bit on the radio, but I certainly wasn't aware of them one bit until I saw that. I remember them playing Bad Sneakers on it, and I remember them doing Kid Charlemagne. And it was like, yeah, this is, give me more of this. What are these guys about?
Where they had the question and answer section where they like lyric and they're like, Snake Mary, who is that? I remember that.
Exactly. And yeah, so the whole sort of like dry, sardonic, like New York Jewish humor thing, like immediately grabbed me also. So it was like, yes, I totally relate to these guys and I get where they're coming from. And let's see if I can find all their records as soon as possible.
Sure. Well, there's so many wonderful ones to enjoy and so many lessons to be learned from every one of them,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And continually. So that's another kind of funny thing about them is that I learned all of these tunes right then in like 9th and 10th grade because I was, like I said, I was learning about harmony. And so this stuff was very influential on how I thought about harmony. But coming back to it as an adult, you see so much more of the logic of how these songs are put together. Like I used to think, oh yeah, here's a cool chord and here's another cool chord. But they're really connected in intelligent ways. And they're just really reward repeated listening and repeated, coming back to them and playing them again and analyzing them again.
Yeah. Well, they're a treat to play live. We both had the pleasure of playing a big chunk of their stuff over the years, occasionally together,
Yeah.
depending on the ensemble that we're in, and it's always a treat. And we had the. I guess you were with us the year we did the Royal Scam,
Hmm.
played the whole thing. Yeah, that was pretty neat. It's like every year we did a full album front to back, and we were working our way backwards. So we did Katie the next year and Pretzel and Countdown. We're actually set to do the first album if we ever, get back in the groove, you know.
Sure. We'll
And
be
for
back
some
soon.
reason, Gaucho hasn't. They didn't go forward. They kind of started at Asia before I even came along, part of this musical collective that I've been part
Hmm.
of for many years called the Bad Ash All Stars. And you just started working backwards, and it's like, well, now we're kind of at a point where you hadn't done Gaucho and you hadn't done Can't Buy a Thrill. Let's do them both.
Sure.
Who knows? Who knows? We'll see what happens. So, Bill, tell folks a little bit about your music and your teaching and your YouTube channel.
Well, primarily I'm a jazz piano player, and in the past several years, I've well, how do I put this? The older I get, the more interested I am in older music. When I was coming up in high school, like I was really into modern jazz from the 60s. I loved Herbie Hancock, and I still love these guys, don't get me wrong. I loved Herbie, I love McCoy, I love Chick, all of that stuff. And the older I get, while I still love that music, the deeper of an appreciation I have for the stuff from the 40s and even the 30s. Bebop, and even the era before that, some of the swing era stuff. So, in the past couple of years, I've discovered this educator named Barry Harris, who's a very famous cult sort of figure, right? Who's been teaching jazz on his own in New York since, probably the 70s. Although he's been playing since the 50s, and he's been teaching informally since the 50s, but he's been teaching formally since the 70s and has developed this whole language of how to actually play bebop and how to actually describe how that music is put together and works, and it's revelatory.
Excellent.
So anyway, I have a YouTube channel where I teach a lot of those concepts from Barry and from other people too, but sort of specializing in some of those Barry Harris ideas.
Okay. And what is your channel?
And so my channel is called Bill Graham Music.
Okay, that's simple enough.
Mm-hmm.
So just /Bill Graham Music, and it'll take you there.
Exactly.
Okay, excellent. Well, please, folks, swing by and subscribe to Bill's channel. There's a wealth of information waiting for you there.
Thanks.
And tell them a bit about your original music. You've been making original music as long as I've known you, and I've known you for at least going on 20 years now.
Yeah, so my original music, it's hard to categorize exactly, but it combines elements from jazz, elements from contemporary classical music, sometimes elements from my kind of conception of pop music, which is heavily influenced by Steely Dan, of course. Yeah, jazz harmony, lots of improvisation, but also lots of written kind of more dissonant 20th century classical kind of concepts working in it, all melded together. One of my earliest influences is Frank Zappa. So even though my music doesn't necessarily sound all that much like Zappa on a surface level, on a spiritual level of sort of not feeling like it has to be one particular kind of thing.
Sure.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, I definitely am aware of the variety. And yeah, and where's a good place for folks to check out some of your original stuff?
My Bandcamp page. That's just billgraham.bandcamp.com.
Okay.
Or you could also find it on my website, which is billgrahammusic.com.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming by. And
absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to talk about or play this music with you. So I knew you'd be the perfect person to co-host this one with me. And maybe one day we'll get Donald Fagen on here. I'll have you come back for that one.
That'd be great.
Yeah, but I don't think he'd be down for a deep dive like this anyway. So
right.
It's cool that we get a chance to do this anyway. And so tell us a little bit about just some of the building blocks of their music that kind of run through their whole catalog.
Sure. So Donald and Walter grew up listening to a lot of jazz, listening to a lot of basically 30s and 40s sort of big band and then smaller group bebop kind of records. And so there's this running sort of harmonic. It gets much more sophisticated as it goes, but even from the beginning, it's never like just kind of straight rock harmony.
Right.
There's always this jazz kind of element, even though there's not necessarily, how do I put this? So there's the harmonic element of jazz, but like none of the spontaneity of jazz. And I don't get me wrong, I love their records. I love them a lot, but like being objective, saying,
Well,
what are they really doing? They're taking harmonic concepts from jazz and sometimes bringing in killer soloists to play, jazz kind of solos on top of it. But the arrangements are very controlled.
yeah, it's not like jazz where you just get in and blow and improvise. It's all very buttoned up and thought to the last
Exactly.
note and beat.
Exactly. It's like, so in that regard, it's much more related to me to like big band music than small group, jazz kind of improvisational music.
Sure. Even though
You
there's
know what I
some
mean?
great improvised solos here and there.
Exactly. Just like in big band music, there are featured soloists here and now, but by and large, it's about playing the arrangement and
Right.
bringing some personality to the arrangement, but playing what's on the page.
Right. Well, that's a great way to put it. Yeah. Okay. Do you see any connection with like, the great pop writers of the 60s, the Beatles and guys like that at all?
Not really. I think it's pretty much a different kind of a thing. They're coming from, like I said, coming from those jazz records and coming from R&B and the blues, much more than pop music,
Right.
generally speaking.
That's why it's such a special breed of pop music. It's kind
Yeah,
of its own thing. There's really very few contemporaries that they have.
yeah, no, really none.
Yeah,
They're really a category unto themselves entirely.
yeah, really are. All righty. Well, why don't we take a look at start at the beginning, I guess. And do you want to dive into Do It Again, or do you have a few kind of things you want to point out that kind of run through all their music?
Okay, yeah, there are just two little harmonic things that I want to point out that they use all the time. One of them is what's sometimes called the mu major chord. All the mu major chord is a major chord with an added ninth. So, like if you had a C major chord, 1, 3, and 5, you add the 2 into it, the 2 or the 9. And it could be in any inversion, but generally speaking, early in their music, it has the root in the bass. And then once you get to about the midpoint of their records, it tends to have the third in the bass.
Oh,
So you'll get this voicing of it all the time, where you've got the third in the bass, and then a quartal voicing. That means a voicing built in fourths,
right.
going from the second, and then the fifth, and then the root. So a lot of people will mistakenly identify this chord, like you'll see this in songbooks sometimes, written as E minor 7 sharp 5.
Mm,
And that's not correct, because that's not what it is. It's a C chord, and it just happens to have the third in the bass. And it's got that tension of the added ninth, but really it's just a C chord. Okay.
yeah.
There's one other chord that they use all the time, and that's this polychord, or not really a polychord, but a slash chord. Well, they'll have a root note. Say we're in C again. They'll put the C in the bass, and then instead of putting a C triad over it, they'll put a G triad over it. So that's a triad on the fifth. And what that ends up building is a C major 9 chord that's missing the third.
Yeah.
So this is a very distinctive chord that they use constantly. But again, it's important to understand that this is a C type of a chord, not a G type of a chord. Right? So it's not a G with the fourth in the bass. It's a C with a triad on the fifth.
Is that the first chord in Asia?
No, the first chord in Asia actually is a B major 13, which is a B in the bass, and then all of the black notes.
Nice. So yeah, it's a little denser than the one you were talking about, the mu.
Yeah, exactly. The mu or that major 9, no third.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I
Sound,
love that stuff.
which, yeah. So anyway, yeah, those are just a couple of chords that are going to come up over and over again. So I thought I'd point them out
Yeah, okay.
first.
So Do It Again. That's their first hit out of all of them. Hold on a second. I have a little slideshow thing that will go by quickly. But yeah. So anyhow, yes, this is our evolution of Steely Dan in the 70s. So the first tune we're going to look at is Do It Again. This was the original band. It was the first lineup, and it basically was that group for the first 3 records. Give or take a few people. By the time they got to Pretzel Logic, they had Jeff Porcaro on drums as well, and they had some different additional players. But this is about, as basic as it got, I'm pretty sure, the original band that was Steely Dan. Because as a lot of you probably know, when they got to the 4th album, Katie Lied, Donald and Walter basically parted ways with the band and started using a who's who of studio musicians, the cream of the crop, basically. And, they had the clout to call pretty much whoever they wanted. And sometimes they put together 2 different bands, and kind of rotate them around and have them each take stabs at the songs and then kind of decide which one they like the best to put on the record. So it's almost like musical chairs. They do like musical bands sometimes, especially towards Gaucho and Asia around then. It was, and again, who's who. Top flight band is in one day and the next day they swap them out for another one. It's just like, I like the vibe of this better. Let's go with these guys, so it's just amazing. So anyhow, this is the original lineup, and this is a very polished sounding song when you listen to it. I mean, right out of the gate, that sophistication was there, and that level of ingenuity.
Excuse me.
There's definitely, it's almost like it sounds like it could have come later in their catalog, I think, from a production point of view. But it's,
I can see that from a certain point of view. Definitely. It also is kind of harmonically, though, about the simplest thing they ever did. So it all stays just diatonic in the key of G minor. This is almost kind of like, well, it's obviously very influenced by the blues, even though it's a slick, kind of more sophisticated sounding version of it. To me, the way they hang out on this 1-chord vamp here reminds me of something you might hear on like a Howlin' Wolf record or something, or Albert King or something, one of those 60s kind of Chicago blues artists where it's a blues, but it doesn't move on to the 4 after the first 4 bars like you expect it to. It just hangs out here, and finally, when it moves, it's just all simple inside the key. That's C minor 7, D minor 7, E flat major, D minor 7, back to G minor 7. And that's the entire song. Goes to this D sus, which is just the 5 chord. Right, so that's all we got. We got 1, hangs on the 1 forever. 16 bars to be precise. And then when it finally moves, it goes down to the 4. And even though it does move through these chords, it's really basically the sound of the 4, 5, back to 1, 4, 5, 1. You know, this is essentially a minor blues.
Yeah, with a rather exotic solo played on the
Yeah,
electric
so then,
guitar.
yeah, so Denny Diaz plays this killer solo on the electric sitar. You can tell the difference between Denny Diaz and Jeff Baxter because Denny Diaz is the jazz player, and he never bends any notes. And Skunk Baxter is the kind of rock blues guy on these first couple of records. So that form, by the way, of 16 bars of G minor 7, then that little turnaround back to G minor 7, that happens over and over again for the entire song. And so it's a little bit confusing, or it can be a little bit confusing because the guitar solo comes in 4 bars early. 4 bars early. He comes in right at the end of the vocal phrase, but there's supposed to be another 4 bars. Well, not supposed to be. There is another 4 bars of the form before it gets to the actual top again.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like he's playing 5 phrases of G minor 7 before it goes on to the turnaround. But if you are hearing it right, he just comes in 4 bars before the top of the form.
Yeah. And he's got some unique note choices. I mean, for a solo that you heard on classic rock radio in 1972, it's pretty sophisticated stuff.
Yeah, no, certainly. Like compared to, I don't want to throw shade on any guitar players that were his contemporaries, but yeah, no, he's playing some pretty hip stuff, certainly.
Yeah. What can you talk a little bit about what's hip about it?
Sure. So, what really differentiates it to me, the fact that Denny Diaz is really coming from a place of bebop, is all of the chromatic passing notes in between. And you can actually contrast this with the solo that Donald takes right after it, which is much more diatonic.
Yeah, the synth solo.
Yeah, well, it's actually an organ. It's a transistor organ, a Yamaha transistor organ.
Oh, wow.
So what Denny Diaz is playing is all this kind of stuff. As opposed to, like, say, which is like a more bluesy kind of vocabulary, right? Denny Diaz comes in and says, I can't remember the exact lines that he plays, but you hear all of those all those notes in between the chord tones, right? So when I say, right, I'm not just playing inside of a scale. I'm not just saying like, right? I'm putting all these extra notes in between. Right? You hear him playing all that kind of stuff. And that's what identifies it immediately that, oh yeah, that guy, that's a jazz player playing on it, and not, just your typical kind of blues rock pentatonic guitar guy.
Yeah, and there's some of that in their catalog too, depending on the tune.
Sure.
The stuff that Skunk played is more in that.
Yeah, no, that's definitely more the kind of stuff that Skunk played.
Skunk was a great pedal steel player too.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Skunk thing he did. So he was really versatile in a lot of styles.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
all the ones that Denny didn't do.
Right. If you pay attention, Skunk plays a really minimalistic, almost just rhythm solo on the fade out. And it's on the form of the tune still. But yeah, check it out if you haven't listened to it recently.
Kind of hear it in my head, yeah.
Yeah. Almost like his version, like a Steve Cropper / maybe mixed with more like an R&B kind of rhythm guitar player.
Mm-hmm.
Like a Curtis Mayfield or someone like that. But playing just real minimal little chunky chordal things. It's nice.
Yeah. All righty. Well, shall we move on to the next one?
Sure.
Okay. Now here's another one that hints at being a 1-4-5, but when it gets to a turnaround, it's all jazz.
Yeah. Now this one, this is the first one to me in their series of modified blues tunes. And there are kind of a lot of them in the
Bodhisattva.
first half of their career. Yeah, Bodhisattva is. In that it starts off with this. Let me go back to a piano. Well, it actually starts off with a modal kind of vamp, right? It starts off, not that, piano. Okay. So it starts off with this just G to F. Hanging out on this. There are those twin lead guitars. Yeah. Etc. Eventually, Donald comes in with these chords that are a direct reference to "So What" from Kind of Blue, the Miles Davis record.
Mm-hmm.
These are these voicings called "So What" chords that Bill Evans played, where you've got a fourth, another fourth, another fourth, and then a major third.
Nice.
And listen to it. He plays. Sorry. Anyway, so it goes through that whole intro. And then when it gets into the tune, finally, it tricks you into thinking that it's going to be a 12-bar blues, right? It starts off on the 1 chord for 4 bars, and then goes to the 2 chord, or excuse me, goes to the 4 chord for 2 bars, and then back to the 1 chord for 2 bars. So you say, Bodhisattva, won't you take me by the hand? Bodhisattva, won't you take me by the hand? And I'll be there. Check this out. So this chord, E flat major 7, this is the flat 6 major 7 chord. That comes from the parallel minor key. So if you're in G major, the parallel minor is G minor. So the minor scale built on the same root. And the chords you get in G minor, I'm not going to go through all of them, but they include a flat 6 major 7 chord. So that's what they play. This is going to be a recurring theme, that they borrow chords from the parallel minor key a lot. And it goes up a tritone to an altered dominant chord, which is A7, flat 13, sharp 9, going to D minor 7. Again, this is in the key, well, from the scale of G minor. In the key of G minor, we would typically have a D7 chord, but just in the pure G minor scale, we get this D minor chord. Okay, and then they go back to E flat, F, G, flat 6, flat 7, 1. It's the the Iron Maiden change,
Right.
Super Mario change, right?
The guitar solo, or there's 2 guitar solos on here, are pretty cool. Talk a little bit about those. First one's Denny, and the second one's Skunk.
Yeah, this is a good way to hear their contrasting playing, because they definitely both sound good on it. And you can hear that they're playing pretty different vocabulary between the 2 of them. Again, Skunk is playing more typical, he's playing at a high level, don't get me wrong, but he's playing more kind of idiomatically rock guitar, right?
Yeah,
Greasy,
got
kind
that
of
little
rocky
kind of
blues.
that little kind of Phrygian sounding lick at the end with a fast tremolo picking. Yeah, that's kind of a unique one.
Sure.
Or
But
the
yeah,
outro.
again, Denny, if you listen to the solo on Do It Again, you can hear that's how he plays.
Yeah. This tune kind of almost reminds me of a 50s kind of bop kind of tune, that
Yeah.
dunk. You can almost see people at the sock hop kind of dancing to that kind of
Yeah, absolutely. It's got that kind of throwback, not quite Sha Na Na, but, almost that kind of Happy Days kind of vibe, right? With the
Yeah, that's pretty, like, you would have run across that in a number of songs back then, or some
exactly anything by Bill Haley and the Comets. you
Yeah,
know.
exactly. And well, and then that solo that Denny does with that, that really fast stuff going on in there.
Yeah,
That's
that's like some rockabilly or
rock
almost
around the
coming
clock
out of like
almost.
Les Paul or something.
Yeah, very cool. All right, well, let's go on to another one. Another one that is kind of hits at a 145, but doesn't go there.
Yeah.
Uh,
So Pretzel Logic you're talking about,
yeah,
right?
let's see here. There we go. And you can see they started using a lot of studio musicians in addition to some of their regular band at the time. Um,
Yeah. This is like the first real rhythm section improvement that they've made. Again, not to knock the original guys, but once they started bringing in the session players, the playing got a lot better, obviously. And so you got Wilton Felder on bass and Jim Gordon on drums. It's a much more pro sounding rhythm section, grooving kind of rhythm section. You know what I mean?
you can tell something's different about it
Yeah.
for
Tell
sure.
something's different about it. Walter plays the solo on this one and
Yeah.
sounds very good. This is actually one of his better solos.
Well, I think he did a number of ones that were, as good as the ones the studio cats they hired did. I mean, he's got a number of them, Josie and Black Friday, Bad Sneakers, Gaucho.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, he's
those are all great.
mhm, definitely. So this one, to me, there are sort of three songs from around this time period. I guess four if you count Bodhisattva also, but they're also in such close proximity. This one and then Chain Lightning and Black Friday are all like they're all these boogie kind of start off like a 12 bar blues, but then turn into something else in the turnaround.
Right.
That almost became a little bit of a cliche for them. Um, Even Peg is sort of a 12 bar blues that's got a bridge,
Very
which is the
true.
chorus, you know. But anyway, so we're talking about Pretzel Logic is in A minor. And so maybe let's walk through what would happen in a regular minor blues in A
Okay.
minor. So a regular minor blues in A minor, say this kind of shuffle feel. We're on the 1 chord, A minor 7. And then we're going to go to the 4, D minor 7, back to the 1, A minor 7. And then either B half diminished, the 2, or F7, the flat 6 dominant, which is really the tritone sub for 5 of 5. Don't worry about all that jargon. It's no big deal if you don't know what I'm talking about. But so we got this flat 6 chord or the 2 half diminished, either way, going to a 5 altered, going back to the minor 1. Okay, so that's what we'd expect to hear, like A minor, D minor, A minor, D minor, A minor, and then just the regular turnaround. Okay, so let's see, what do they play? So they start off on that 1 minor, although it's immediately colored by this D6 or B minor 7 over the A. You got B minor 7 to A minor 9, both over that A. So you've got this F sharp sound, or almost like a Dorian kind of modal sound. And then instead of going to the 4, instead of going to D minor 7, they go to the relative major of that. They say F major 7. So we get this sound instead. And then it does go to the real 4. Minor 4, I mean D minor 7. But then this turnaround is really cool. They go to A major. So we've been in this A minor blues, and then all of a sudden, we've got this this E sus chord. Excuse me. This is another chord that they like a lot that they got from Lauren Nero. Todd uses this chord a lot. Everyone uses this chord a lot. But what it is a root with a major triad a whole step below it.
Sure.
So E with a D over it makes what we call an E9 sus4 chord. Because what it's got, you've got the root down here, D is the 7th, the flat 7th, the minor 7th, F sharp is the 9th, and then A is the suspended 4th. You could also put a B in this chord if you wanted to, and it wouldn't make much of a difference. So they go from there to this A major chord. It's that chord I was talking about before where it's a root and then a triad on the 5th, that major 9 with no third sound. So what this makes is a 5-1 progression in A major. Remember, we were on an A minor blues, and then now suddenly we're on this A major 7 kind of a sound. And then they sequence it down a step from there. So they say D9 sus to G major. They do that a couple of times. E sus to A major, D sus to G major, E sus to A major. And then here's kind of a cool thing. They say C major to D major, back to C, before going to F. So we're back to our flat 6, flat 7, 1, which is just like we had in Bodhisattva. Remember, we had the E flat major, F major, G.
Right, the Iron Maiden chord progression.
Yeah, they do it here too. But because it ends on minor, it sounds a little bit different, right? So flat 6, flat 7, back to minor 1. So what does all of that mean? That means that it's a lot more difficult to navigate these changes when you're going to solo on them than just a regular old blues. Like if you're Eric Clapton or something, you can't play this song. It's just not going to happen because you know these blues boxes or whatever, but you can't deal with the harmony that's moving through different key zones. So, you know, if you tried to play that's all fine over that, but now that doesn't really work anymore. So you've got to actually navigate it.
Pretzel, that's logical pretzel there.
Exactly. So that's a nice tune. I've always liked that. And I also like the stop time verse that happens after the guitar solo.
Oh, you mean
what I'm talking about? Where they come in
I stepped up on the platform.
Exactly.
And gave me the news. Said you must be joking, son. Where
exactly. Yeah,
did
exactly.
you get those shoes?
That's a real typical walk up. Right. It could I don't think it's harmonized like this, but it would traditionally be harmonized A minor 7, G over B, C, C sharp diminished to that D. But where's it going? Yeah, it is going to D minor, right? So we could have said I think they just go straight up.
Get those shoes.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a nice little tune, definitely.
It's a great tune. Now this next one provides a little bit of a leap, I would say, in some ways. It seems like it's a little more harmonically uptown. Would you agree with that?
We're getting into Dr. Wu next, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
There's something about that song that just kind of points to the future, like the kind of arranging and chords and such that they used on Asia are, in full play
Definitely.
here. As a matter of fact, this song almost seems like the father of Asia, the song.
Yeah. Yeah, it does almost seem like a prototype for Asia a little bit.
Yeah, even with the kind of drum solo over the stabby kind of slash chord and all that.
Exactly. And the piano and having a hip, like famous jazz soloist, jazz saxophone soloist on it.
In this case,
In this
Phil
case, Phil
Woods.
Woods. Yeah. Incredible bebop alto player. Love Phil Woods. So this tune, Dr. Wu, is going to be another one that exploits the sort of parallel major, parallel minor relationship, but in a slightly more oblique way. Because here are the tonalities that we're really hanging out in Dr. Wu. Ultimately, it's in the key of G. But we're also going to get some coloration. Whoops. From the relative major of the parallel minor. So in G, again, the parallel minor, G minor, the relative major of G minor is B flat. Yeah, exactly. So in the chorus, there's a lot, not just the chorus, but particularly in the chorus, there's this sort of dialogue between G major and B flat major. And we'll see when we get to that. But we also end up hearing the relative minor of that G major. At the beginning, we hear that as being the tonic until we get to the pre-chorus and realize, oh shit, we're actually in the relative major, and we've been there the whole time.
Well, that kind of G to B flat kind of happens in the first verse, right? Because it's like, "Are you with me, Doctor?"
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That chorus.
But right,
yeah.
when you say really, it's going to that B flat. Are you really
exactly
shadow of the man that I once knew?
Right. So we start off with some signature Steely Dan slash chords. We've got one of those D over E chords. And then a C over F to G over C, back to C over F. So let me play that one more time. Then it gets into this little vamp where it's going between E minor 7 and D over E. The verse starts, so at this point, we're thinking that E minor is the tonic, right? That's what you're hearing. You're hearing E minor as being the key of the song. But pretty soon you realize, okay, Katie tried, I was halfway crucified, I was on the other side of no tomorrow. There's the real one.
Can you turn the piano up just a hair?
Absolutely. So that verse started out on the 6th chord, the relative minor, right? E minor. And then it goes to what you hear initially as being the flat 6 of E minor, that's C major. Turns out it's really the 4 chord of G once we get to that point where we can hear that. But going between those two chords, and then we're on this 2 chord now, A minor 7. We hear A minor 7, B minor 7, A minor 7 to G. Now we finally hear that G as the 1 chord. Wait a second, where are we at? Let's see here.
You walked in?
Yeah, you walked in. So that's from 1 to 2, up to 4, C major 7, down to 3, 2, 6, A minor 7 to E minor 7. Here's this little turnaround here where we go 4. Hear this mu major chord right here. This is G add 9, but with B in the bass.
The 3rd.
We went C major 7, that's the 4, to 1, but with the 3rd in the bass, to 5. And this is another one of those 5 sus chords where you've got a D in the bass with a C chord over it. Back to the 1 finally, or not finally, but we're really confirming this G major, hammering in that this song is in G, right? All night long goes to D minor 7. What the heck does D minor 7 have to do with G?
That's almost, I don't know, suddenly you're in C or something.
Exactly. So you got to look at where you're headed. You're heading towards that C major 7 chord, which is the 4 of G. right?
Right.
So typically, or in an older style of harmony, you would use what's called a secondary dominant chord, where you borrow from the key that you're heading towards. So in this key, we're in G, and we would expect to see a G7 head towards C, right?
Yeah.
But they use a 2 instead of the 5.
Right. You're doing the D minor 7, which is the 2 in the key of C that you're heading to.
Yeah, exactly. So you say, all night long. You could put a 5 after it, but they don't. Listen to what it would sound like if you did. All night long, you would sing that stupid song. And it's a little bit more obvious that way, right? It's a little more oblique when they do it this way. All night long, we would sing that stupid song. Down to the 3, 2, and every word we sang we knew was true. So those, we've talked about all of those chords so far. That's the exact same turnaround we had just a second ago. C major 7, G add 9 over B, up to this D sus chord. Are you with? Now we're on G major 7. Are you with me, Dr. Wu? We're gonna go to that B flat major, which we get to via G minor, right? In terms of the connection to what the hell does B flat have to do with G? It's the relative major of the parallel minor.
Sure.
And so we get that sound. And we continue in B flat for a minute there, right? So we said G major 7, and then B flat to the 4 of B flat, 6 of B flat, which is, again, G minor. And then we've got a 2-5 of B flat. Are you crazy? Are you high? Which turns out to be what we call a backdoor dominant, or a backdoor 2-5 back into G. So listen to that. C minor 7, F7, G major 7, goes up to the 3, B minor 7, 4, C major 7, back to G, and then we go to this F major 7 chord. That F is borrowed from the key of G minor. The rest of the chord is staying from the major key. With me, doctor. Oh, what's it? There's this little bridge. Normally, you would expect at that point, it would go right back to a verse. But there's this little bridge that Phil Woods solos on it. Something like that. Where does he go? He's got this really hip line right here where he says, no, what is it? Yeah, that's what it is. When you get to this other really hip line right here where he plays on the E minor. So he's just playing bebop over that.
Yeah.
So what's happening there is we've got this bridge, G to F, E minor, G, C, G over B, A minor 7, G over B, C. And then this time it walks down, A minor 7, G, F, to the intro again. Or that should have been, sorry. And then we get to another verse.
And that's pretty much the
song. Except at the end, there's this vamp where it's going between. Are you with me, doctor? That little drum fill that Porcaro plays, where it's the 2 against 3 polyrhythm. And those are just those same two chords. We've got the E minor 9, or D over E. Sometimes they put a third in it, also making it a minor chord. And the F over C. I'm sorry, C over F. Anyway, that all makes sense?
Yeah.
Cool.
Top 5 Steely Dan song for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it. It's not super obvious, but it was never a hit, but
right. Okay, so that's what I was trying to get at earlier when I was saying that Steely Dan wasn't in the zeitgeist when I was coming up, is that I didn't have any idea what tunes were hits or not.
Oh, wow.
So I just knew the records and I loved them. It's funny, same thing with the Beatles. Like growing up, I knew the Beatles records deeply, but I didn't know what songs were hits or not. So I just figured that everyone knew Only a Northern Song, you know?
Right.
Everyone knew anyway. So same thing with Steely Dan. I just figured that Dr. Wu was like one of the major tunes. And it's like, what do you mean? It's a little bit more of a deep cut. That should be one of the major numbers.
And I think it's the most sophisticated song on that particular album.
Definitely.
You know?
Yeah, no question. Even though Katy Lied is a little bit of not as a whole, but this song and a couple other little things on it definitely point towards Asia. Mm-hmm. And in fact, some of the songs from Asia were written around this time period. You know, there's that demo of Black Cow from around the Katy Lied sections.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. All righty.
Anyway.
Let's see here.
So now we're jumping to the Royal Scam, right?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so
Green Earrings.
Yeah, Green Earrings.
Quite a funky little chordal harmony kind of thing going on with this song.
Yeah, it really is. So this is kind of interesting. When I was getting ready for this this show, I listened back through the whole catalog, but backwards. So I started at Gaucho, then went to Asia, then Royal Scam, and went all the way back through the records. And this is not to criticize any of the earlier rhythm sections, because again, like I said, that first rhythm section upgrade they got at Pretzel Logic is a substantial one, but it's like there's this quantum leap in rhythm section, just energy and feel when you move onto this record. And the reason for that is that the rhythm section on all but I think 2 songs on this record are Bernard Purdie on drums and Chuck Rainey on bass. And it grooves so hard, and there's so much air in the groove, and everything they play it's just improved on every level, in my opinion, at least.
Oh, it's super fun. But
I'm sure it was really like startling almost, like to listen to those 3 records in a row and then jump back to before it. It's like, what happened to the groove? Nah, that's not quite going to work. As cool as some of the stuff is on those records, like I said, it's just there's no the rhythm section on this record in particular is just in a class unto themselves.
Yeah, and I imagine they had a history together prior to playing Steely, so you know.
Yeah, if you're not hip to it, run out and listen to the Aretha Franklin version of "Until You Come Back to Me." That's what I'm gonna do. It's a Stevie Wonder song that Stevie wrote when he was like 15, but then it was unreleased. Anyway, this particular recording has Chuck Rainey on bass, Purdie on drums, Donny Hathaway on Rhodes, Richard T on organ, Aretha on piano and vocals, Hugh McCracken on guitar. Is that everybody? Yeah, like just... Anyway, if you don't know that, go and listen to it immediately.
Do it.
Groove is just so killing. Anyway, so Green Earrings has a couple of interesting features.
Let me point out a couple things before I move on.
Oh, yeah, by all means.
So Denny Diaz is the one guy from the original lineup that continues to pop up sporadically throughout the rest of the records. He plays a solo on the tune Asia. and he plays the first solo on this particular song. And also, Elliot Randall, you know, you could almost consider him the first studio musician they ever used because, you know, he plays the famous solo and intro and all the solos on Reelin' in the Years, the first album. It's like, here you got two completely able guitar players, yet you bring in this other guy. You know,
Yeah.
like even early on, they were kind of thinking that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, you got neither one of you quite are in the wheelhouse of what we have in mind for this particular song. So we're going to bring this guy in.
Yeah.
And it was
I'd
great.
like to point out on the subject of Elliot Randall, the solo that he plays on Kings on the first record.
Ripping.
Killing.
Crazy.
Yeah,
crazy
exactly.
Freddy's. Yeah.
So everyone talks about him on Reelin' in the Years. And yeah, that's classic. Absolutely. But that solo on Kings, and Kings, the song in general, is a real highlight for me.
On that record.
From that first record. That's one of the top couple of tracks on there. Do It Again is great. I love Kings. I love Turn That Heartbeat Over Again, the closing
great.
track.
Yeah.
It's awesome. But anyway, we're talking about Green Earrings now. Right?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. Did you have anything else you wanted to say before I start talking about the changes?
Pointed out who plays on that particular one. So yeah, tell us what we got going on here. You know, that opening bit with the little chordal stabby kind of da 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 da. It's almost like this is the evening news with Walter Cronkite, you know?
Sure, I can see that. To me, it's a reference to McCoy Tyner, you know, or that kind of harmony. It's these fourth chords. Right, and this sort of, I can hear what you're talking about, that evening news thing. It's like sort of pseudo-dramatic, right? It comes in. So we're hanging out on these fourth chords. Notice that they're moving in parallel. Even though this is really an A minor chord, so if you think about the change, it's A minor, right? And if you're strumming on the guitar, it's basically A minor. There's this momentary C sharp that we get when this whole chord moves down in parallel.
Yeah, well, it kind of slides back and forth a half step, right?
Exactly. Yeah, so just the whole chord moves down a half step and then back.
Yeah, that whole line almost kind of winds up being chromatic before it's done, you know?
Yeah. So this is sort of another Steely Dan thing, is something called constant structure or parallel harmony, right? Where they'll take the same chord type and move the whole thing, voicing and all, up or down a given interval. So the whole verse of Green Earrings is in this parallel harmony, or we're on this A minor, you know, chordal kind of a thing. And then it takes it down a whole step, back up, and then same chords, and then these are two more of those sus kind of chords that we keep running into, right? This is an A over B, and then G over A.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's the whole verse. So we've got this. Really hangs out on this for a long time. Reminds me a lot of a modal jazz kind of vamp tune. Then parallel harmony again. Up in half steps. Sus chords moving down, back to A minor. Occasionally, that thing from the intro will come back.
All right.
What that is, by the way, I don't think I addressed it when I was initially talking about the intro, moving from those kind of typewriter evening news chords.
Right.
Is that these are more of those root with a triad on the fifth. So he's got an E chord, or not an E chord, but an E in the bass with a B chord over top of it. This B is the fifth of E, and then that's moving in parallel. B over E to D over A, or A over D, excuse me, and then down to G over C. repeat those same 3 chords. Okay. There's a bridge, this instrumental bridge that's really nice. I'm sorry, did you have something to say?
No, go ahead.
Sorry, you looked like you had something that you wanted to jump in with.
No, go ahead.
Okay, cool. So yeah, this instrumental bridge is really nice. We've been in A minor this whole time, moving around in parallel harmony with these sus kind of chords. Now we finally get these lush, sort of more regularly voiced chords. This is B minor 9, F sharp minor 9, A major. Okay, that's the exact same move. Not the exact same, but very similar to that move I was talking about a minute ago in Dr. Wu, where they're using the 2 of this chord that they're moving to.
Right.
So they're on B minor in order to get to A, instead of having right, that would be like a little bit of a more typical harmonization. Then this time, and then same thing here. This A minor moves down in parallel. What's going to happen here? Gets to this. Oh, that's right. It's this A major 7 sharp 11. And then really unexpectedly, you figure from here we're going to just go back to, probably, right?
But instead,
but where do they head? They're Steely Dan. They're not going to do that. So now we're going to F minor. And then there's this vamp over F minor, right? So let's see if I can get myself back into that. We were... Oh, that's right. We go to the D sus. So that's pretty cool. After we've said B minor to A, and then we expect it to turn into A minor 7, sequence it down heading towards G, right? They changed the upper voices, but put the D in the bass instead. So now it's a 5 chord instead of a 2 chord. We've got this C major 7 over D. That moves down in parallel. B flat major 7 over C moves down in parallel again to the 5 of E flat. B flat 13 sus to E flat major 7. 5-1 in E flat. And then this unexpected A major 7 with this sharp 11 to the natural 5th in the melody.
They just kind of go dunk, 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 and then the guitar solo starts.
And then we've got these same 2 of the next key going down to the next key, right? So it's like we've got this F minor 7, and that's the 2 of E flat. That's where it goes. Again, we would normally put a 5 in between it. Say F minor 7, B flat 7, E flat major 7, and then E flat minor 7. Normally we would put this A flat 7 in between, going to the D flat major. And then they go another descending 5th, but to a sus chord. And then take it up a half step.
And then back to the intro, kind of, or part of it.
Exactly.
And then we go to the second guitar solo.
Yeah, we get another guitar solo over this vamp.
Which is Elliot Randall on that one.
Mm-hmm. Till we eventually get back to the chorus. Green earrings, I remember the rings of rare design. I think, is there one more of those little intros?
feel like there is before that big,
and then it fades out just on
that
this
big lick with the
long
phaser, and he's going,
little triplet thing. Exactly.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
With the phaser just kind of winding up and getting more kind of gritty as you go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Is that that must be Elliot playing that solo, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, of course.
Pretty ripping.
Because the other one, the one over the F minor 7 is clearly Denny.
Oh yeah, you can tell very much, very much. Do you think this is one of their best live tunes?
Yeah, and it's certainly one of the ones that's real fun to play. You know, like, again, as a sort of jazz-oriented player, this just feels right at home.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it's always, the crowd really loves it too, and there's some, just like hitting those da-da-da-das every time they come up and really nailing those. I mean, the arrangement surprises you in a good way,
Totally.
Definitely. All right, so next we're getting to Asia, their most successful record.
Yeah. This is definitely the album of theirs that I heard first, unquestionably. Again, sometime in 9th grade, must have been. So I can't remember if I was 14 or 15, but I heard this record, side 1 of this record in particular, and was just, I had seen that VH1 Storytellers of them, like I said a couple hours ago, and I liked it. But then when I heard this record, it was like, yes, that's it.
Yeah. It's a brilliant record, top to bottom, and all killer, no filler.
Yeah.
Not to say that they have some filler, but
sometimes. Sorry, I keep rolling over the power cord.
Their filler is always unique, It's just, they have their really just kind of oddball, quirky songs that.
Right.
Sometimes.
And it's funny, sometimes those are people's favorite tunes. It's just, the stuff that I think is filler, maybe other people don't necessarily think of as filler, and vice versa.
What I discovered as we went back and played these albums top to bottom is a lot of those songs really grow on you once you get inside of them. Mm-hmm. It's like stuff like Throwback the Little Ones. It's such a goofy song, but it's a blast to play that tune.
Yeah, definitely.
Really good stuff. Or, I guess the kind of oddball one on this one is probably I Got the News. Mm-hmm. It's probably the least hailed tune on this record, but I love it.
Yeah. No, it's still cool. Definitely. Victor Feldman on vibes.
Tell us about Deacon Blues. It's quite an ambitious one. Just looking at the chord sheet for this song, there's a lot there.
Yeah. So this song, this record in general, the level of harmonic sophistication just increases a lot more.
How so? Are they just stacking these chords thicker than they were before, or what?
More than that, it's just that there are more chords, per tune. Like they are, they're happy to write much longer linear chord progressions than just here's an 8-bar thing and we got to loop it now and it's time to repeat the verse. These things just evolve in a little bit of a more linear fashion. Mm-hmm. So the first thing that we hear in this tune is these 2 chords. So we've got a C major 9 to a G add 9 over B. What's that? It's a 1 chord to a 5 chord.
Easy enough.
C to G, really. And they just dress it up by, instead of saying, maybe if they were like a folkier kind of LA or San Francisco kind of band, that's what it would have ended up being, right? But what we've got here is instead this cool 1 to 5 with the major 7 to the 5 in first inversion with the add 9. And what they do is they sequence that around a bunch. And what I mean by sequence is they take that pattern and they move it around to different pitch levels. So we play it in C, and then immediately follow it up in B flat.
Right.
And then immediately follow it up in D, and then end with playing it in C again.
All right.
And then we've got these two interesting changes here. E flat major 7 to E7 sharp 9.
The Jimi Hendrix chord.
Sure. So this song is going to really play around with the interaction of A minor and C major. So relative major and minor keys.
Right.
Ultimately, it's basically in C and A minor, kind of shifting between those, although we do visit some slightly other areas also. So after all of that, the reason that I say all of that, of us being basically in A minor at this point, is because this is the 5 of A minor, right? E7 sharp 9 wants to go to A minor.
Sure.
Okay. And so instead, they take us to the 5 of C.
G, yeah.
Yeah, so you hear, okay, we were in C. These chords aren't quite so much in C, but I can see he's just sequencing them around. That sounds like it wants to go to A minor, right?
Sure.
It doesn't really sound like that to us because we've heard this song a million times,
Right.
but
that's
yeah,
naturally where that
heard that change.
Yeah, because it wants to be a dominant 5 chord leading to the
exactly.
A.
Yeah.
But we're not going to give it the satisfaction of doing that.
No, we are not. So instead, we're going to go to this G13 and move it down in parallel, because they like that parallel motion, to this F13. So you could see that as being related to the blues. Okay, think about a C blues has got a C7, an F7, and a G7, right?
Right.
And so instead of getting plain old G7, F7 to C, they say, "This is the night of the expanding man." A little bit hipper, right?
Yeah.
I take one last drink. Sorry, I forget. No, that's the last verse, isn't it? Doesn't matter. The harmony is the same. By the way, I forgot to point out this chord. So after the G13, F13, first thing we get is a G over A, going back to that F13, right? The obvious thing to do would have been to just go to the G13 again. This is the day of the expanding man. But they harmonized it differently. This is the day of the expanding man. And then they repeat that, right? 5 to 4. But then this is wait a second. Okay, yeah, so that's what it is. It's A minor 7 to D7 now, which is a 2-5 of 5. So we're in C, right? The 5 is G. 5 of G is D7. So that's what we had. We had A7 sus to D7, 5 of 5 of 5 to 5 of 5, and you expect that to go to G, but they go to F instead. So they go to the 4. Now it's major 7, like you would expect in a major key.
It's useless to ask me why.
Yeah, so useless to ask me why. That E7 is 5 of A minor. So here we're hearing that interaction between the tonic and the relative minor again, right? 4, 5 of the relative minor. This B flat 7 is actually the tritone sub for E7, which, remember, we know that E7 is the 5 of A minor. The 3rd and 7th of a dominant 7th chord are a tritone away from one another, if you don't know what a tritone substitution is. And so when we move the bass note a tritone away, we get another dominant 7th chord that has those same 2 notes as the 3rd and 7th flipped. So we can use that B flat 7 in the context of A minor the same way that we would use E7. And that's exactly what they do. They go from that A minor 7 to B flat 7 and then just go straight to E7. Ramblers, wild gamblers. Goes to this B7 flat 9. That's 5 of E7. So that's 5 of 5 in A minor. And then let's see what that follows up with. Is a B half diminished to E7. This is a 2-5 in A minor. Right, because in A minor, the 2 chord, B minor 7 flat 5, 5 chord is E7, right? So the 1 chord is A minor. And that's what we get after we've got our E7, B7. Instead of going straight back to E7, like you would expect, the B7 turns into a half diminished, and we get that 2-5, which again, into the second half of the verse, goes to G7 instead of A minor. And the second half of the verse proceeds basically like the first half of the verse did, right? G13. This next section is a little bit different. This next phrase is different. It starts on F major 7 again. He says to ask me why. This time it actually resolves to A minor. Throw a kiss and say goodbye. So what happened there? We had A minor 7, that's the relative minor, and then G minor 7, that's the 2 of F, right, which is the 4. So we're still in C.
You're going to do the 2-5.
You're going to have that 2-5 into 4.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what did we say? Da, 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 ba, 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 ba. Check this out. So we went from 4 to 1 in first inversion. That C sus2 over E, or C add 9 over E. Then another 5 of 5, D13 to 5, G13. So let's hear that whole phrase. Now we're going to get to the chorus.
Chorus, yeah, which is starts on A minor.
Starts on A minor, so that starts on the relative minor again. E minor, so we go from 6 to 3 to, and again, we see this as a recurring theme. Instead of having a 2-5 to 1, they just have a 2 to 1.
Right, so the D minor to C.
Exactly, instead of D minor G7.
Then they hit a B flat.
Exactly, then they hit that B flat, which is alluded to way back in the intro, remember?
Yep.
So they actually, I don't know whether they wrote the intro first or this chorus first, but either way, that's slick how that relates so seamlessly.
Right, your ears already heard it, so it's not
exactly
not expected, but yet not quite a surprise either.
Yeah, and then so yeah, you get that B flat major 7. So that's the flat 7 of the key, Scotch whiskey, down to our A minor again. So relative minor walks down, relative minor with the 6th in the bass. So this is F sharp minor 7 flat 5 to F major 7. This is really just A minor staying on top, bass notes walking down.
Right.
C add 9 over E, so that's 1, 4, F major 9, back to our A minor 7. So that's the relative minor again. 3. And then we can't just repeat the intro like normal, right? So they only do the second,
step, doesn't it?
Well, so it starts on the D major. Yeah, instead of starting on C major, we get...
Right.
I'm sorry.
And it's like an abbreviated version of that.
Yeah, like so it's only the second bar of it. Instead of the full C, G over B, B flat, F over A, D, A over C sharp, C, G over B, E flat major.
Just kind of take the second
They
half.
just do the second half of it. D major, A over C sharp, C major, G over B, E flat major. Yeah, okay. The whole second verse complex is the same as the first verse complex, right? Where you've got that A section, right? So we'll call that A, and then B, and then A again, C, and then the chorus is the same also.
Is there like a solo or something after the
Yes.
second chorus? Yeah.
Yeah, so after the second chorus, we've got this killer tenor sax solo by Pete Christlieb, who was one of the saxophonists on the Tonight Show band. You know the story about them bringing in the wrong tenor player?
No.
So yeah, they were they were watching the Tonight Show, and one of the tenor players in the band was just playing some killing shit, and they're like, "We got to get that guy in." And there were two tenor players in the Tonight Show band at the time, and they called the other tenor player in, and it was immediately like, "Oh, nope, this isn't the guy we heard."
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did
Who's the other guy? Pete Christlieb. All right, can we get his number?
Oh, I get it. Okay,
yeah.
So they didn't settle.
Yeah, no. And this is really a wonderful solo. This is sophisticated here, that there's a whole new section that the solo exists over. We noticed that in Dr. Wu, right, where there was that new section that the sax solo happened over. And another one we haven't talked about, but Kid Charlemagne, the guitar solo is over a whole other chord progression that doesn't have anything to do with the verse or chorus section.
I like it when that happens.
Yeah, exactly. It's like brings some drama to the arrangement.
Yeah, and I could think of a number of rock bands that did that too. Kansas is a good example. It's like when it's time for a solo, it's time for something new that you haven't heard under it.
Yeah. Yeah. So this solo section starts on C major, E minor. Check this out. We've got this dominant cycle where we've got A7 to D7 to G7, and then B7 is 5 of E minor, which then goes to A7. So you hear that as being a 2-5 in D, but then 4, we've got this rising chromatic line. We've got F major 7, F sharp 7, sharp 9, G major 7, B7, sharp 9.
Almost echoes 5. The intro.
Yeah, right. Absolutely, but going in the opposite direction.
Right. Yeah.
So instead of saying, now we're saying, although, yeah, we also get the exact same movement from the end of the intro, where you've got that E flat major 7 to E7 sharp 9. Right, from major 7 to a dominant sharp 9 up a half step.
Sure.
That's exactly the movement we get here. F major 9, F sharp 7, sharp 9, G major, B7, which leads us back to E minor, A7, another one of those. So let's see here, coming from the top of the solo. I love this little line. What is it? Back to the intro. No, it's E flat, sorry. Last verse. Yeah, is back into that. I love that tenor solo. That's just a wonderful solo. Sorry, I don't really know it. I was just listening to it earlier this afternoon and played along with it a little bit. Maybe I should transcribe it and learn it for real.
They've got some great tenor solo or sax solos.
Yeah.
What's the one that Wayne Shorter does? Is that Asia?
That's Asia. Yeah. Okay. And so I wanted to point out, actually, thanks for reminding me, this is now the third track in a row on Asia that has a distinctive, different tenor sax soloist on it, right? So on Black Cow, it's Tom Scott playing. Sure. And then on Asia, it's Wayne Shorter, and then here on Deacon Blues, it's Pete Christlieb.
Yeah, it's almost like they got a little tired of guitar solos.
Yeah,
yeah.
There's well, there are a couple of guitar solos in Asia, of course. That's true.
Yeah, I think
Denny and
I think Walter
plays a short one, and Larry plays a little bit.
Yeah,
but yeah, by and large, like there's no guitar solos on Black Cow or Deacon. Right, there's that wonderful Rhodes solo that Victor Feldman plays on Black Cow.
Yeah, that's great. And I got the news.
Some guitar solos on side 2.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously, Walter plays that solo on Josie, and he plays a little solo on Home at Last.
That's true.
And there's the I'm sorry, forgive me, Jay Graydon solo on Peg.
Right. One of many people that tried that, and they just love that kind of Hawaiian slidey dyad thing he had going on there.
Yeah.
That really reeled him in. And it's cool. You watch the outtakes, and it's just like everybody brought a Mutron phase, and they're just like, no.
Whoa, I just lost you.
Uh-oh.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, everything looks okay here. Hey, Bill.
Hey, man, I'm sorry. I don't know what's up. My computer just keeps crashing on me.
Yeah,
so
that's okay.
I have to switch over to my phone.
All righty.
Anyway, sorry about that. Hope I didn't miss too much.
No, I just yammered about 10 cc for 15 minutes.
Right on.
That's okay. Cool. Well, I guess we can't quite see what you're doing with your hands, but we could at least kind of...
Not so. I mean, I can do that.
Okay, cool. All righty. Well, the last tune that we're going to talk about, is Babylon Sisters. Hold on, let me bring up my little slideshow one more time here.
Cool.
And this is the one. Again, it's Chuck Rainey and Bernard Purdy. So just a stellar rhythm section. Got Steve Kahn on guitar, and Randy Brecker on trumpet. Tom Scott in there, and Don Grolnick on clavinet.
And a very nice horn chart by Rob Mousney.
Yeah. And
he arranged the horns on it. It's just a very tasty chart.
Yeah. What can you tell us about this album compared to the last one, and how they made even more advances, besides the fact that they hired a drum machine and named him Wendell?
So it's interesting. In some ways, it's a step forward, and in other ways, it's maybe a step sideways. If you know what I'm saying. It is perhaps in some ways a little bit more complicated harmonically in some of the tunes than even some of those tunes on Asia, but the rhythm section is just not as satisfying to me because of that Wendellization of the drums,
the quantizing of the beats. Basically, it's almost points to the age we live in now.
Exactly.
And
it's very clean. It's perfect, but it's and I know there are some people that really love that super pristine thing. That record to me is just a little bit of a step too far in that production. direction. However, I love the songs on it, or at least I love a lot of the songs on it.
On Gaucho.
Yeah, on Gaucho. Not every single one, but I think some of the tunes that are really good are really good.
What are some of your favorites? Like the title track?
Well, so Babylon Sisters, Glamour Profession, the title track, Gaucho, absolutely, and not Time Out of Mind, excuse me, Third World Man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, those are the real classics to me. And even though it's not on the record, it should have been the second arrangement if it hadn't have gotten erased by that studio stage.
Infamous lost song. You know, one thing I'll point out, and you can check them out on YouTube, is that Gaucho was meant to be a double album, and they demoed a ton of songs that never made the record, and some of them were actually better than some that made it, I think, including the infamous second arrangement, which they toiled over forever, and then a engineer recorded, like, erased part of it and then like fled from the studio and they were so disheartened that they just said screw it, and they never finished it. But there's pretty murky sounding demos out there that let you hear what it's all about, and it was a pretty catchy tune. And,
I mean, I get why something like Hey 19 is on the record and even why it's a big hit, but something like Hey 19 or Time Out of Mind is just not as interesting to me as something like the second arrangement.
I'd say My Rival's another one that's kind of
I don't mind that one.
No, that points right to the Gaslighting Abbey on Two Against Nature. You know, it's like, or some Kamakiriad tunes. It's like it's almost like My Rival spawned an entire album. Down the road. So tell us a bit about Babylon Sisters.
So Babylon Sisters is an interesting one in that, just again, the harmony is even that much denser than what we were hearing on the record before. Even though it starts actually with quite thin harmony, just literally open fifths in the bass. Like power chords down here.
Right.
Saying what is it? Yeah. Listen to this chord right here. It's so pretty. So this song, in general, once we get into the verse, is sort of basically speaking in B flat, but it's colored by some different key areas. So we're sort of between B flat minor and B flat major, interchanging between them. But that whole intro was in B major, up a half step from B flat.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. Fagen liked that a lot, especially getting into this period, starting in a key that was disconnected from the key that the song was going to eventually settle in.
Yeah, I think New Frontier on the next album is a great example where the intro is in B and then that verse drops down to A.
Yeah, or think about like IGY, where it starts off, I forget exactly, I haven't played IGY in a while, but it starts off in one key and then it moves a third away by the time it gets to the verse.
Yeah. He was messing with that quite a bit around this time.
Exactly. So the way that he transitions, though, is so cool. So we've been in B major, these B major kind of sounds, and he gets up to the 3 chord of B major, which is D sharp minor. And enharmonically, D sharp minor is the same thing as E flat minor. So he plays E flat minor 7 and uses that to pivot into B flat minor. And then so now the verse starts in D flat minor, goes up to C minor 7. This is borrowed from the parallel major. So normally the 2 chord in a minor key would be a half diminished, but here we take the minor 2 from the parallel major key and go up to this 4 dominant, E flat 13. So check out this movement right here. He's going to sequence this sound of having a dominant chord resolve down a whole step. So this is thinking like a 5 chord going down to a 4 chord. And then he does the same thing up fourth, A flat 7 to G flat major, back up to B flat minor 7. That's such a slick move. Drive west on Sunset to the sea. Turn that jungle music down. Just until you're out of town. And then starts over again. This is no night. But instead of going to E flat 7, continues up to D minor 7. And it's a real occasion. Back to B flat minor. So we've got 2 of those chords, C minor 7 and D minor 7, coming from B flat major, but then it resolves back into B flat minor. And then, oh, what do we do? 2, 5, 1 to B flat. And then we're heading eventually towards E flat major. In a more conventional sort of harmonic style, you might go B flat major, B flat 7 to E flat major, right? So you'd have 1, 5 of 4 to 4. But what Fagen does is he goes from 1 to the tritone sub for 5 of 4 to 4. So there we've gone from B flat major, E7 flat 5 to E flat major, and now A7 altered. So you think he's just sequencing that down, but oh, what happens? This A7 is borrowed from D minor, and D minor is the 3 of B flat. And what we get in the chorus, Babylon sister, shake it. We're in B flat, and we're going from 3 up to 4. Babylon sister, shake it. Okay, now we go back to the 1. Oh, I'm so young. Oh no, it doesn't actually. I'm sorry. We go to 5 of 5 first. C7. So fine, so young. F7. You've got a little dominant chain to B flat major. Tell me I'm D turns into a minor, or turns into a minor 7 chord. So it's like a 2-5, B flat minor 7 to E flat 7. And you expect that to go to A flat, but it doesn't. He says, all right, E flat 7, that's the tritone sub for that A7. So I can use that to get back into D minor.
Okay.
And so that's such a nice little move. If we're going back to the chorus, Babylon, sister, shake it. Sister, shake it. It's going to be that C7. So young. F7, B flat major. I'm the only one. D minor, the C, and then does our little move again. Now he's going to move up a half step and have a couple of chords back from the key of B for a second. He's going to have one of these little moves that he likes. B over E to F sharp over E. And then check this out. It goes up a whole step. So this is like the 4 chord in B. And then he moves it up a whole step. Before going to our B flat 7 flat 9, which is of course 5 of B flat minor, taking us back to this sequence. This is all in B major still. 3, here comes that thing again. Goes to B major, B7, that's 5 of 4, 4. Goes to this A7 flat 5, which unexpectedly takes us to E flat minor. Listen to all this beautiful movement that he plays over this E flat minor chord. There are all these moving chords in between. They say, And that takes us into the second verse.
Yeah.
There are some more little details in the arrangement that are super sophisticated, such as the second time through that chorus, instead of going that B major, E7, now instead of having the A7 to get us back to that E flat minor, because he wants to go right back to the verse, check this out. So he's going to say that B major, B7, E major, and then he's going to go straight to F7, which is 5 of B flat minor. How's that line go? This is where that trumpet solo happens.
Right.
Over an abbreviated little version of the verse. He goes into the second half of the verse. My friends say no, don't go for that cotton candy when you're playing with fire. 2, 5, 6, tritone sub 5 of 4, 4. Yeah, 5 of that D minor. And we're into our full chorus section. Let's see here. Anyway, when we get to the very end of the song, he changes the vamp up. We start on that D minor to E flat, 3 to 4 thing. And then the second time, it goes up to this G over F. Moving down in parallel. So that's G over F, F, G over F, E flat major, D minor. And also I want to point out there's one really hip thing that happens in the background vocals, which are sung, by the way, by the great Valerie Simpson of Ashford and Simpson songwriting fame.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, she wrote Ain't No Mountain High Enough. Serious songwriter and singer. But so they've got her singing Babylon. You got to shake it, baby. You got to shake it, baby. You got to shake it. So this little figure, you've got to shake it, baby. You've got to shake it, baby. You've got to shake it. It's such a Zappa kind of thing. Where
Yeah.
Got to shake it, baby. So that's a 7 syllable phrase. You've got to shake it, baby. And he's phrasing that over, you've got to shake it, baby. And the way that that scans across the 4/4 bar line, although they're going in triplets there. Do that again. I'm sorry. Hear that? How that scans across the beat?
Yeah.
Love that.
So that's pretty...
Anyway, sorry to ramble on so long, but you know, the harmony of that one, as we can see, is again like even more complicated than it was in Deacon Blues.
Yeah.
And we've come a long way from
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about how, if it went any further on Donald's solo stuff and the 2 reunion albums?
Yeah, so in a way, it does continue to develop, but in another way, it kind of continues that sideways trend from Gaucho, where it starts getting a little bit too slick for my taste, you know, and the production moved over to digital, and it starts sounding a little bit thin. I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound like an old man shouting at a cloud, here about 80s sounds taking over. But I think The Night Fly is an incredible record, even if there are some production choices that I don't super agree with as much. Comic-Kyriad, I've never really warmed to. I have to be honest. The sounds are just so canned. It sounds too much like a product of 1989 to my ears. All those FM sounds and programmed drums. But I really do think that Two Against Nature is an excellent record. Again, I don't think it sounds very good. I think it sounds too buttoned down. There's no threat of vomit. As Bruce Hampton would say, there's no threat of vomit. It's
the threat of vomit.
Yeah, there's no threat that something wild is going to happen. It feels so buttoned down.
Oh yeah, it's got a rather sterile production.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I mean, it was nice to hear Walter play some more guitar solos, but I don't want to hear him play on every song. It gave the record this kind of samey quality. Half of the fun of these Steely records was having a different soloist on every one of them.
Exactly. And also you think about some of the guitar players that they were working with around that time in their live band. It's like, all right, we've got Wayne Krantz hanging around. Let's get Walter to play the solos. It just doesn't make much sense to me.
Yeah, I have to agree. And he played some fine ones, but it was just a little too samey from track to track. And that's true with the next record as well.
Yeah. Who's
that? I don't know if you heard that Morph the Cat album that Don did.
Sure.
I can't remember who the soloist was on one of those songs. Or
it's Kurt Rosenwinkel.
Yeah. That's
sounds great on that. I liked that record a lot when it came out. I haven't heard it kind of since it was new, but I remember enjoying it a lot. So on Two Against Nature, the songs that are really happening to me are the first one, Janie Runaway. I think that's really good. I really like Almost Gothic.
That's like a new level in a way, that song.
Yeah, that's a really happening tune. And then from the end of the record, West of Hollywood, with that great Chris Pop tenor solo.
Taking it further out every time he plays another round on it.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's really great. And I also really, really like the title track of Everything Must Go.
Yeah. That's
I can't remember who's the tenor player on that. Is it George Garzone?
Sure.
I can't remember, but I really, really like that tune. Definitely. I also want to take just a second to talk a little bit about when they rearranged some of their tunes when they finally came back and started playing live in the 90s.
Sure. I mean, that version of Reelin' in the Years is probably the first one that comes to mind.
Yeah, that, and since we talked about Do It Again earlier, I checked out that 90s arrangement of Do It Again, which I've always liked a lot.
Yeah, that was on that Storytellers, or at least a little part of it was.
Yeah, exactly. And they do some really interesting things to it, just to kind of dress it up a little bit. First of all, Fagen is older, so they move it down a whole step. It was always in too high a key for him. That's why they had that D. Palmer guy singing on the first tour, some on the first record. But so they move it down to F minor. But now instead of this being a one chord vamp, hear that little motion in the bass. So we're going from F minor 7, C minor, D flat major, F minor. When they go to the turnaround, instead of it just being 4, 5, 6, 5, they make them sus chords instead. So they make it in this key. It would be B flat minor, C minor, D flat major, C minor. So instead they say A flat over B flat. So it's B flat 9 sus, C9 sus, D flat major 9, back down to that C9 sus. And then the next time it's even nicer. Listen to this. They say that B flat sus, C sus, D flat major 9, and then I love this chord. So So what's happening here is this is actually a C7 with an A major 7 over top of it. So it's a C7 that's got a flat 9, a 13, and a sharp 5. So that's a really unusual sound. And I'll play that again. They say, Jack, do it again. That's just, to me, a little bit of a cooler sound than just saying, Jack, do it again. Right, if we say, Jack, do it again. They also do this whole thing in the middle where they have these modulations in the solo section.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So they've been in F minor, and they're saying, Jack, do it again. And then suddenly it's up a minor third, Jack, do it again. And it's in A flat minor for a second. And then it moves to C minor for a second, plays the same kind of stuff. And the guitar solo then is in E minor. So it's just a little bit less monochromatic than hearing that one key over and over again.
Sure, yeah, it's like a different song almost.
Yeah, so I really like that rearrangement. Also on Bodhisattva, they do a little thing on the live version where they put in the first 8 bars the changes from this Charlie Parker tune, Blues for Alice. So Blues for Alice is a blues that starts on a major chord, and well, it's a blues for Alice, it's typically an F, and it's got all these descending 2/5s. So it says F major 7, E half diminished, A7, D minor, D flat 7, C minor, F7, D flat. And so they nab that on the second time through each chorus of the guitar solo on that live version from Alive in America.
Mm-hmm.
They're in G, Bodhisattva, right? So the first time through, they play the regular changes, G, C, G, E flat major, A7 plus, D minor, F major, E flat major, F major, G. But now in this next chorus, they're going to say G major, F sharp half diminished, B7, E minor 7, E flat minor 7, D minor 7, G7, C major 7, and then continue on. So you hear that instead of just being, they say that second time. And then still all of those changes are the same as usual.
Yeah. And what are they doing on Reelin'?
Reelin', I can't honestly remember. It's been a minute, but do you remember what key they move it to?
I want to say the first chord's G.
Okay. They turn it into this sort of
Did they instead of G to A, it's more like G major 7 to F sharp minor?
Yeah.
7?
Well, it's like, yeah, G major 7 down to F major 7. I think. Don't quote me on that, because it's been a minute since I checked out that arrangement.
I'd have to ask Scott.
I used to listen to it all the time back when I was in high school. I used to have a tape of that I drove around with.
Well, it's funny because our keyboard player Scott loves that version, and whenever we approach Reelin', he's always doing that. It's like, no, don't do that. We don't know that version, but he loves it.
Oh, that's what it is, right? So it's going between. It's like the peg change, or that first change of Deacon blues, right, where it's going G major 7. Right, so like the D sus2 over F sharp.
Yeah.
Something like that. also one little thing they do in the verse of Reelin is instead of playing those descending diminished chords, right? Like normally it's a you know what I'm talking about
Yeah,
there?
sure.
Diminished chords. So on the live version, instead they make them these minor 11th. So what voicing? So you wouldn't even know a diamond if you held it in your hand.
Well, that reminds me of the slidey chromatic part of Asia.
Yeah. Well, so that's that same chord I was talking about from Bodhisattva, right, where we play. It's the exact same chord right there, playing, or it's down a whole step from there, but it's coming down in parallel. So having those minor 11th chords coming down in parallel rather than having.
It sounds more modern.
Yeah.
Like that diminished descending sounds like something you hear at a silent movie back 100 years ago. Like they got her tied to the train tracks and
totally
kind of stuff. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, that rearrangement has a little bit more of the later Steely Dan sound.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think later they reverted to the original. I
think, but I like that 90s version better personally. I always have.
A little hipper.
Yeah.
Well, cool beans. Well, Bill, anything else to share before we wrap it up?
Not that I could think of. Is there anything else that you wanted to address?
At this point, I don't think so. But I'd love to do one of these again sometime. I don't know who else's catalog we could take apart like this, but it would be fun to do that. Maybe King Crimson or something.
Yeah, we can figure something out.
Yeah, that might be kind of cool. All righty. Yeah. Well, Friday I'll be back chatting with Billy Cobham. We're really excited. He's over in Switzerland, so we'll be doing this in the afternoon. My friend Eric Sanders will be joining me. I sometimes feel like a bit of a softball when I interview these drummers. Like I know you guys are dying to hear about nested polyrhythms and all that fun stuff. And I'm a guitar player. I just, it's like I'm missing some of this. So I'm bringing in a specialist for this one. Definitely.
Cool.
And we've got some questions that I think are going to surprise Billy. There's no way he's had an interview like this, at least not recently. I wouldn't think. Yeah.
Awesome.
So I'm excited about that. And then Saturday, I'm chatting with Mark Bonilla, who played with Keith Emerson. They did that wonderful Keith Emerson tribute concert about 6 months ago. Who's who of modern prog? The amazing Rachel Flowers was there. She's awesome. Jordan Rudess, Brian Auger, who is a famous organ player that Keith admired greatly.
Oblivion Express.
Huh?
Oblivion Express.
Exactly. Yeah. With Alex Litgerwood on vocals and stuff, who went on to sing with Santana and the Dixie Dregs. When the record company's like, "You guys need a vocalist," it's like, yeah, right. Like that's gonna make a difference, You got, like, this is instrumental music. You don't try and shoehorn a singer on it at the 11th hour. That's not going to cut. But they did get on American Bandstand. It's kind of cool seeing Dick Clark introduce the Dixie Dregs. That was something else. All right. Again, Bill, remind everybody where they can hear your lessons online at and your original music.
Okay, so you can check out my lessons on YouTube at youtube.com/BillGrahamMusic. And you can also check out some of my original music and teaching also over on my website, BillGrahamMusic.com. You can also, like I said, hear some of my originals over on my Bandcamp, BillGraham.bandcamp.com.
Excellent. All righty. Well, cool beans. And and if y'all are ever interested in the original album that we all played on, Story of a Life, I've still got a bunch of those. So just let me know. You hear the theme song every week when we do this show. So
yep. Yeah, that clavinet was sitting behind me all night tonight.
Yeah, the Honer, right?
So yeah, exactly. It was sitting on top of the Rhodes.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the same clavinet.
I just thought, that makes a catchy riff, and if we're going to have a theme song, it might as well be some music that I helped write, So
cool.
It's gotten heard. That little riff's probably got heard more than the rest of our album combined. many times over. And we're actually working on a little bit of new music. Actually, I've been throwing a few things Bill's way, and he's helping me kind of retool some new stuff. So who knows what'll come of that? But I'm working on new music this year, so who knows? We'll see.
Excellent.
All right. Well, take care, Bill. I'll see you soon.
All right. You have a great one.
All right.
All right. Thanks.
My pleasure.